The opinions expressed on the radio program by the host, co hosts, guests, and call in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions and responsibility of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Genesis Radio, www.genesisradio.com, Genesis Radio's owners, management, or affiliates.
Well, good evening, and this will be the first episode of Politricking. Kind of like that, Politricking.
Oh yeah, they play some tricks on us.
Yeah, they play some tricks on us.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So, welcome to GenesisRadio.com. My name is Kendall Stevenson. Beside me is Mr. Ronald Yates, and we are Politricking. So, we hope you guys enjoy the conversation that we're about to get into. A lot of things to unpack. There's been a lot of things going on in politics, man. I mean, this has been one hell of a week. But on a good note, I always like to give out that little moment of gratitude. So over the weekend, I had the opportunity of working with a young lady. Her name is Tatuana Sutton, and we gave turkeys out and food and clothes, and my man DJ Strategy was there doing his thing. And the one thing that I really, really appreciated most, and it kind of gave me a little spark of hope that maybe something will come together some kind of a way, everybody did it for free.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was there as a volunteer, and they were there to actually help out the community. And those are the things that I like to show some gratitude for. And what did it say? I'm trying to give the young lady her flowers now.
Well, you know what? It's always a good thing to recognize people when they've done something. You know, I mean, we don't do that enough. We wait till people are dead,
Mm-hmm.
and then we go to church and act a fool because we didn't say the things that we needed to before they departed. So, you know, I think that that's something that we used to do before, generation before, and I think it's something that, you know, out of necessity will have to come back.
Mm.
Yeah, you know, because I think these next couple of years are going to be a test and a trial for us.
You think we're gonna have to get a new green book?
You know, let's hope it doesn't go that far, but I do expect there to be some serious changes that are going to affect not just the Black community. It's going to affect everybody. You know, a lot of people think that this last election is the answer to all their problems,
Mm-hmm.
and it may be just the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of many problems to come.
Well, when you talk about things like inflation, a man wants to put these tariffs, 25%. He wants to put the tariffs on, and what was it, Mexico and Mexico, China, and Canada.
Uh-huh.
So those are out. Those are we outsource to us people. We import a lot of goods from these countries. Now, you put a tariff on it, that means the price is going to go up.
Absolutely.
And we, as the American people, are going to have to pay the cost of that.
You know,
So what is he doing? What I don't understand. What is he looking to gain by doing such a thing?
That's a good question, and it's difficult to be in the mindset of somebody like Donald Trump. You know, because nobody really I guess most of us don't really understand his way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's very, very different. The reality is most Americans cannot afford any additional cost, right? America, at least the American working class, is strained right now almost to the point of, you know, breaking, the bubble just breaking. And, you know, for a long time in this country, we saw hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
We say we're the richest country in the world, why we have homeless people. Why aren't we taking care of our elderly and our young people? You know, we've abandoned that. And, you know, probably in the late 80s, early 90s, what was beginning to happen was the largest redistribution of wealth ever.
Mm.
Everything started flowing in one direction, and that was to that top 1%.
Was that the trickle down effect? Was that you're talking about at that era?
Well, yeah, you know, when Reagan was elected,
Mm-hmm.
one of the first things he did was fire the air traffic controllers.
Mm.
So here we are, 40 years later, and what we have is a major shortage of air traffic controllers.
They're talking about over the weekend that we may have some problems with the flights because there's not going to be enough air traffic controllers to maintain it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that Reagan came up with, and shortly thereafter he fired the Greyhound bus drivers who were on strike.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was to begin the process of breaking the labor movement, which up until that point had made some significant gains. We went from, in say 100 years, we went from children working in sweat factories
Mm-hmm.
to having laws coming into effect, the 8-hour shift, days off, sick time, stuff like that, in that 100-year period. Well, since that time, we're reversing things.
Yeah, it
right?
seems like we're regressing.
Oh, we absolutely are.
Yeah, because people. I don't know if people realize it that the unions, having a union, you may like it, you may not like it, but you do have a bargaining table.
Mhm.
You have a voice at the table.
Right.
But without the union, you stand 10 toes down with your chest up and roll the dice and hope for the best.
Unfortunately, even the unions now don't have the power that they once had. And we're from New York,
Mm-hmm.
Terry from New York. I mean, we're probably intimately familiar with the Taylor Law, which says if you go on strike, for every day you're on strike, the city takes 2 days' pay. So the idea was to make sure that in places like New York, where the train strike would cripple the city, that will never happen. Police, fire, EMS can never go on strike.
Now we're talking about the city services because I worked for the phone company and that really didn't affect me.
Well, typically it affected city employees, right? Who, of course, provided major services to the city. So if you decided, well, look, I'd like a pay raise, which all of us want. I want better benefits. I want to be able to protect my family. Well, you go to the unions, and the unions go approach management and say, well, look, we'd like a raise for our employees.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's up to management if they want to agree or not to your terms. Whereas before, you could say, well, like what the auto workers did, they went on strike.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically forced management to the bargaining table. And they sat down and they came up with a reasonable contract.
Let me tell you, I was in the CWA, Communication Workers of America.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first job that I had where we had a union. And I actually learned how strong a union could be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they always, people would say that the phone company was like working for the city or working for a government agency. It's like you wasn't going to get fired because we had that much of a strong union.
Mm-hmm.
But how is that going to help us with today? I mean, like right now, are we still having that type of strength where we can maybe sit back and combat some of what's coming down the pipe?
I don't think so. Not under the Trump administration. I mean, one of the things he talked about doing is getting rid of shutting down the Department of Education.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do that, one of his gripes is the fact that, and I can understand it. So going back to New York City, if you're a New York City teacher,
right,
and you are protected by the union, I guess if you're on probation or whatever, if that teacher gets in trouble, he doesn't necessarily get fired. Sometimes what happened is they have an area where they would have teachers go. They would just report there and nothing to do with education. They would just sit there for 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
and
they call that the rubber room.
Right. They would just sit.
Right.
They would sit there for 8 hours
Mm-hmm.
and collect their check for doing nothing. Right. So I can understand his gripe there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because here you have somebody who's outside the classroom, nothing to do with education, who's getting paid for sitting there reading the newspaper or playing video games on the phone.
Well, that's the way that I guess the system was set up to discipline them. That was supposed to be like in the hockey. You ever see the guys? They put them in the penalty box,
Right.
and they sit there getting paid and they're watching the game. So, but that's the way I guess that the system decided to penalize them.
Well, you know what? A lot of people are. I think that's what turns off a lot of people to the unions. The fact that people who don't have a union, who say, "Well, look, for what this teacher did, I would have gotten fired."
Mm-hmm.
This teacher is sitting in a rubber room somewhere, collecting a check, not teaching my children, collecting a check and doing nothing, have nothing to do with education.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand that, and I think.
So you don't think that's kind of like throwing out the baby and the bathwater? I mean,
But
we're
you
still
know what though? Most of those teachers that's in those rubber rooms
Mhm.
are in the rubber room for minor offenses.
Some of them are some major offenses, right? Not so much now, but
No,
years
no,
ago.
The ones who have been charged with molestation or
Right.
having sex, they're not in the rubber rooms.
Not anymore. Now, before, Me Too and all this other stuff like that, harassment, sexual harassment was, it's an everyday thing,
Right.
right? If you are a stewardess on a plane, you can expect to get smacked on the fanny or pinched, something like that.
I don't know. I'm not that guy. So,
You wouldn't, right?
and I
But-
think if I saw somebody do it, I think I'd have to step to.
Well,
Yeah.
but you have to understand, right? That was accepted behavior.
Mm.
So for teachers who had a strong union, right? I think in New York it was the UFT, maybe cross country UFT, very strong union. And how do you have a strong union? You make campaign contributions, right? You hire or you buy a senator, a congressman. You buy a state senator.
Well, you
right?
you make contributions.
Well, you buy them, right?
Oh, you make contributions.
Well, you call it a contribution.
I mean, because I mean, just technically, even though you made a contribution to me, that doesn't mean you owe me. Well, I know how
Well,
the system works. I know
listen.
what they say about the system, but
If you get $5 million
uh-huh.
from the teachers union and you only get $179,000 as a congressman or $279,000 as a congressman, but you got $5 million from the teachers union, they own you.
Well,
And
I
that is
guess,
the nature
but-
of politics, right?
Yeah, well, we know the nature of politics is distribute resources. We know that.
No, the nature of politics is to get reelected. So right now, everybody who's been elected in November
Right.
is planning on how they're going to get reelected in 2 years,
Right.
right? So for somebody like Trump, who just won this election, he got $1 billion from the oil industry.
Yeah, but he got that before he.
Right.
Mhm.
So do you think that
Oh, he's
Donald Trump
of
is
course
not
he's gonna be
beholden to the
biased.
oil
Yeah,
industry?
Of course, he's going to be biased.
So he's already said, drill, baby, drill,
Mhm.
right? In these areas that were protected, like in the Arctic and places like that. So realistically, he is going to now open up those areas
Right.
to, drilling, right?
Well,
And
we're talking about areas like Alaska.
yeah, and other places.
Right,
Mhm. But again, right?
So now, when this oil comes in, let's say we drill, baby, drill. What are
Huh?
we going to do with this oil? Because a lot of the oil already in the country is we're exporting a lot of it already.
Absolutely.
So what are we going to do with the more
Export it.
oil?
Export it.
So we're going to be the big exporters of the world.
Well, you got to figure, right? One of the things we want to do is flood the market with oil
Mm-hmm.
to keep Russia from getting money from its sale of oil and natural gas. We've been trying to do that for years. One of the reasons that we went to war in Afghanistan is because there's a company, ConocoPhillips, Phillips 66. They wanted to build a pipeline through Afghanistan to bring oil and natural gas out to the coast.
Right.
Well, during this time, it was the formation of the Taliban that said, no, you don't understand. When we fought the Russians, you told us after this war, you would give us money
Right.
to rebuild our country, to build our infrastructure, to make our country, a modern nation. Well, America said, well, you know what, later for we're not interested in doing that anymore.
Mm.
And now you come back and say, we want to build a pipeline that's going to make money for you, but what will it do for Afghanistan and our people? So these plans are on the table for years in advance.
Or it's politicking.
That's it's
Just like
exactly
what's
what it
going
is.
on in
But-
Gaza. You see what's going
If
on.
you pay
Mhm.
attention, they strategically bombed Afghanistan
Mhm.
in a certain manner where they wanted to build the pipeline.
Yeah, make way. That's
Right.
making a way. Like and that's like we talk about with Gaza, with all the politicking that's going on. My man, he should be locked up. If he steps out the country, he's a war criminal, and a whole lot of people.
Depending on where he goes,
Yeah.
not everybody, including the United States, recognizes
Mhm.
International Criminal Court.
Oh, really?
So if he comes here, he is of course safe. If he goes to several countries in Europe, he's safe. There's 100 countries that do recognize that treaty with the ICC. So if he goes into one of those countries and steps off the plane, he could technically be arrested, right? But right now, support is increasing allegedly for Netanyahu.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mm.
Because of the charges. So I read an article just a little while ago, and one of the Israeli reporters is saying that it is almost laughable that you would compare Netanyahu to people like Muammar Gaddafi, to people like Milosevic.
Stalin.
They didn't go that far. They just talked about these recent people that were tried or brought up on charges by the International Criminal Court. So, to say that there's no reason or correlation between them is insane.
Mhm.
44,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 7th.
Men, women, and children.
Right. So in a year, and the numbers are actually probably higher. We're just not getting the actual.
And then the acts that are being committed that I'm hearing about, where the supplies are coming into the country,
Right.
but the soldiers are taking them and putting them in piles and setting them on fire. It just seems like it does seem like they're trying to commit this genocide. They want them all gone.
Well,
You hear about babies who've been shot in the head by
Mhm.
snipers.
that's
you know?
not something new. That has been the plan of the hardliners in Israel for some time, right? They have created a narrative that there were no Palestinians when they arrived. That when they got there, this land was barren. There may have been a few Bedouins that were there, but for the most part, the land was pretty much free of people, and they went there and they were given this land in a covenant, and they built this land into what it is today.
Right.
So for them to say, and if you look at some of these websites that talks about Israel and what's going on, they clearly state that they want to kill the Palestinian people.
All of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. And the United States to say that we are the beacon of democracy, how are we supporting this?
Look, it's like this. Like I was telling you, if somebody commits murder,
Mhm.
and I know that they commit murder,
Mhm.
and I supply them with the weapons,
Mhm.
I'm just as guilty.
Right.
So that's how I look at it. I'm like, to me, I what's his name? Netanyahu.
Netanyahu, yeah.
Netanyahu. Yeah.
Yeah, that's him, close enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know it's Denton. Yeah, but him and Biden, they're in the same boat as far as I'm concerned. They're both war criminals.
Well,
And Trump coming in, he's going to give them more money in arms because he wants to build a golf course and a hotel, right? So he's going to be a war criminal too, isn't he?
Well, he already, when he was in his first term, he allowed Israel to move the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Jerusalem has been disputed territory for centuries,
Mhm.
right? For Christians, Jews, and Muslims. So now that he's on his way back to the White House,
Right.
I was reading an article in the Times, there's a big poster of Trump where they're saying, make Israel great again, right? So for Netanyahu, he has every expectation that Israel will be supplied with the most modern equipment, weaponry, and the resources necessary, as they say, to finish the job. But what is the job? So right now they're bombing away in Lebanon. They bombed in Syria.
Making way.
Well, there's something called Eretz Yisrael, right?
Hmm.
And the idea is to expand the borders of Israel, because for Israel, they have a couple of problems. One is sources of fresh water. That's number one. Number two, they have more people coming to Israel. They need land to build settlements.
Mm.
In order to do that, well, they've already, flattened Gaza. So that'll be, of course, settlement areas, right?
Mm.
They've been using desalinization process to get, source of fresh water, but that's a long and expensive process.
You know what I hear?
What's that?
I hear the pilgrims coming to America.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, they came and then they took a little bit and
uh-huh.
they wanted to expand. More came and they kept expanding and
Mm-hmm.
and till the natives that were here, they dehumanized them
Yep.
and started to exterminate them.
And that's why America cannot say anything about Israel,
Right,
because we have done it, or this country has done exactly the same thing
right.
to the Native Americans. In fact, these things called reservations, they're nothing more than concentration camps.
Concentration camps.
And Hitler got his idea based on reading about,
Jim
basically,
Crow.
well, these concentration camps that they call reservations. Hitler said that, well, wait a minute, they get away with that. Why can't I? And, nobody wanted the Jews of Europe, right? No other European country would take them. In fact, there was a ship that left Germany bound for the United States.
Right.
And when it got here, they turned around and sent it
Turned
right
around.
back to Nazi
That's
Germany, right? Knowing full well that those people would probably be killed,
That's right.
But unfortunately, that's the nature of politics, or politics, right? Life happens from cause to effect, right? And what the media and politics shows us is the effect, but don't want to let us know what the cause is.
Right.
So this whole situation in the Middle East, what's the real cause? The situation in Ukraine, what is the real cause? What's happening, the animosity toward China, what's the cause there?
If anybody wants to chime in, you can give us a call at 888-304-4401. Or you can check us out online. We're on Facebook Live. We're also on Instagram and all the other social platforms. Again, if you'd like to chime in, that's 888-304-4401. That's with Yates and Stevenson, and we are politricking.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
And, I think that this is probably a good time to begin this show, this platform, because I think everybody in this country of voting age expects some major changes.
Mm-hmm.
And, I see people like Joe Scarborough from
Oh, please. MSNBC.
Right, from Morning Joe.
Yeah, he had to go kiss the ring.
He and Mika went and kissed the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody like Cory Booker
Mm-hmm.
is indirectly kissing the ring.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, he talked about the food supply in America and how dangerous it is. Well, Senator Booker's been there for a number of years. Why didn't you talk about it a year ago? 2 years ago? Even when he was running for president, he didn't talk about the dangers of the food that we eat. Now that Robert Kennedy is going to be put in charge of health and human services, now all of a sudden he supports Robert Kennedy in his fight against the food industry and improving the safety of our food. Now you want to do that? All those years you've been in Washington and you didn't say a damn thing about the safety of our food?
No, this is hindsight. And what does Robert Kennedy Jr. know? What does he know about food safety? I thought that was up to the FDA.
Well, of course, as the secretary, he'll be over the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
So he will be the one to decide if the FDA is relevant. Do we even need the FDA?
No.
right? So, I mean, he'll be over a number of different organizations.
Well, you heard what Elon Musk says. He says he wants to cut the fat about 10% of the
Mhm.
government. 'Cause,
Right.
You know, that's Trump's confidant now. So
Until
what do they call it in Italian? What is it? A consigliere? Yeah.
Consigliere.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? They are buddies until they bump heads. Because you got to figure, Elon Musk has a hell of a lot more money than Donald Trump. And for Donald Trump to say, you're going to do what I say,
Mhm.
how I say it, and when I say it, Elon Musk is like, no, 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 Mr. President. I donated 200 million of my dollars to your campaign.
Mhm.
So it may be the other way around. You're going to do what I say because you like these
Oh,
other
but everybody
politicians.
gives him so much money. How can he serve so many gods?
Well, you know, you have to understand something about politics. They only serve the master with the most money. And for us, working class and poor people, we're not heard.
No.
We're not even a consideration. You know, we are so caught up, and I guess the word is the minutia, right? We worry about the small things and we ignore the big things. So, you know, people talk about things like public assistance. So if you got family A who gets $300 in food assistance,
All right.
and family B gets $299 in food assistance, they're going to argue for that $1, right? 2008, Wall Street, bad investments in something called derivatives, which is just junk bonds
Right.
that they were selling. Eventually, the housing market went bust, and so did the derivative market. So these guys now got on private aircraft, flew down to Washington, and said, hey, we need billions of dollars of taxpayer funding because we're too big to fail. Well, for the average American, you can be denied food stamps. You can be denied Social Security.
Yeah, if you make 2 cents too much.
But what about these guys who went down there? They created the problem, went down there and said, yes, we created the problem, but now we want more taxpayer money. And one of the first things they did when they got the money, they handed out bonuses.
Yeah, well, you know we live in a two-tier system. What happens with us don't happen there. I mean, look at this guy Donald Trump. What is he, like 80 something? That is going to just disappear. All his charges is they're all just going to disappear.
Well, they are disappearing.
Yeah, well, I mean, if that had been you and I, they wouldn't disappear.
Well, if it had been you and I, we couldn't run for president.
And well, if that had been Donald Trump had been a black man, I don't think he would have been running for president either.
Well, he would have made it this far.
I don't
right?
think so.
But you know, it's a whole different world.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I think that's something that we need to be cognizant of. You know, as we enter this new Trump era, right? You know, we tell people that have been incarcerated, well, the best job you can get is McDonald's, right? If you're lucky. But what happens now when somebody with 34 felony convictions runs for president and wins?
Mm.
How do you not tell this guy who's been incarcerated, who while he was in jail, got a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, model prisoner, comes out, and now he's got to go mop the floor at McDonald's? Why?
You know, I think it's horrible the way that we treat a lot of people in this country, man. But I mean, just look at us as black people, the way we get treated. We always have to be not as good. We got to be twice as good, sometimes 3 times as good. And what I mean is, like, I have to have 2 master's degree to get the same job that the kid you only got a high school diploma.
And you know what? I think that part of the reason for that is that we have been too reliant on the system.
Right.
Right. You know, we at one point, following the end of the triangular slave trade, we broke away from America because America obviously didn't want us, right? They wanted a system of separation. America had an apartheid system, right?
Yeah.
We didn't call it that, but that's what we had.
Equal but separate.
Right. So what happened was we went and we built places like the Black Wall Street. We didn't wait for anybody. We just recognized the fact that we can collectivize, take our money, put it together. We can build an entire section of the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it wasn't just there. It's other places around the country.
Yeah, sure. Florida, a few different places.
Right.
Yeah.
But what happened is after the destruction of the Black Wall Street, I guess we kind of gave up, right? We kind of lost hope. And instead of going back and rebuilding, we began to say, you know what? Let's work on integration now. Let's work on ending segregation. The end of segregation was the end of so many opportunities for Black people.
Sure was.
You know, we couldn't go to the white hospital, we had our own. We couldn't go to the white gas station, we had our own.
You know, I remember in Harlem,
Mhm.
they had the ambulance service up there, and
Uh-huh.
the colors were red, black, and green.
Right.
And it was a private, their own, our
Mhm.
own. You know,
Right.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, they have one in Brooklyn,
Mm-hmm.
Bedside Mountain Ambulance Corps. And I used to be a member way back when. But yeah, those are things that we have to do because, you know, we live up here, you know, in Poconos in the mountains. And I remember probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a major snowstorm.
Oh,
And it basically crippled this area, right? You know, people without power, the roads impassable. Well, okay, if that were to happen again, you have to figure there's no delivery truck I can get up here. You know, food travels by truck. Trucks can't get into this area, shelves are empty. You know, I mean, we saw this happen with the pandemic, right?
yeah. So I guess we need to start getting prepared for what's coming down the pipe.
Absolutely, we do. This is something that we've been warned about for, you know, centuries, you know, going back to people like Marcus Garvey, right? And we're talking 1950, right? So we didn't get the message then. We didn't get the message under Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, right? We didn't get the message under Dr. King. And even Dr. King, at some point, began to recognize that he saw America, I think, a little bit more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said, I fear I'm integrating my people into a burning house. So he realized that, you know, integration was not the answer.
Well, it wasn't, you know, we integrated, but in order for to have true integration, you're still going to have to integrate resources, and that didn't happen. So, you know, that was more like an emulation. Same thing they did with the Native American. After a while, they wanted them to emulate, to instead of integrating, and we're the only people in this, I think, on this planet that even went through an integration process. You know.
Well, no, there are actually others that went through the process.
For legality purposes.
Well, you know what they did with Native Americans, they actually took their children away from their parents,
right,
and put them in these Indian schools,
right,
where they changed their names, their culture,
their clothing,
everything, right? Made them cut their hair. Same thing they did with us, you know, and that goes on around the world, right?
Mhm.
Wherever the colonizers went, well, they took their language, their custom, their culture, and everybody else, their culture became subservient
Mhm.
to the culture of the colonizers. And I saw something the other day that I thought was interesting. Currently, the major colonial powers, right? America, England, France, those three, what do they have in common?
Okay, you're gonna tell me. So
All of their flags are red, white, and blue, aren't they?
mm,
So wherever the red, white, and blue showed up, well, the language was changed, the culture was changed, the religion was changed, and you became subservient to your new master.
mhm.
So, you know, that is the way things have happened for centuries. And now we have the rise of countries like China,
Mhm.
countries in Africa, countries in the Middle East like Iran. And now America and the colonial powers are saying, hey, wait a minute. We know we were your enemy, prior. We know we destroyed Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but Japan, we want to be your friend now. We want you to contain the Chinese. We want you to contain the North Koreans. Australia, we need to build these nuclear submarine bases in Australia because we need to contain China.
Cuban Missile Crisis
Exactly.
all over again. But see, this is why I really stress on people, especially our people. Go down to the library, go look on to Amazon, and get enough of our books. You can download them. You can take them out of the library, even if they feel like they want to ban them. They're not banned all over. But make sure you get a little collection of books that now you can introduce your children into what went on, because if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Absolutely.
So here we go again. We're going through that process of repeating this again. What did they call it back in the 70s? They had a program called the Wetback, where they wanted to Operation Wetback. This is where they wanted to get the Mexicans out. I think Reagan one of them started that program. It was a mass deportation, kind of like what we're doing right now again. We're going back to this mass deport. And what's going to happen if they did? I don't know if this country can afford it, because that's going to cost a lot of taxpayers' dollars. That's one. Where are you going to get the money and the funds to do that? And then if you do that, then who's going to harvest our crops when they come in?
Well, you have to understand one thing about politics. They don't care about cost, right? They never did. Because they know who's paying for it.
We are.
So they don't care about cost. They'll feign like they care about cost. Like when you say, well, look, we need to improve our healthcare in this country. First question is, well, how are we going to pay for that?
Right.
Now, when Clinton was president from 92 to 98, America had a budget surplus. In comes George W.
Bush.
And all of a sudden, now we need to go to war. First with Afghanistan. We're looking for one man, but we need to invade this entire country. Then, as soon as that war gets cooking, now we need to invade Iraq.
Weapons of mass destruction.
That we knew were not there from the first Gulf War.
I tell people, I think he just went after the man because his daddy didn't get him.
Oh no, it was oil. Oil, and the fact that Saddam Hussein and several others in the region wanted to go onto a gold-backed currency that would have crippled the U.S. economy. So because of that, rather than accept the fact that they wanted to establish their own gold-backed currency and control their own oil resources, we decided we need to go. And if you remember, the first thing Bush said was, we need to build a coalition like we did in the first Gulf War. Then he started talking, the clock is ticking. Well, we'll go alone if we have to. Why the rush? What threat did Saddam Hussein pose that was so great that we suddenly had to launch this massive invasion?
I have no idea. Weapons of mass destruction.
Right. That we knew weren't there, and we never found a single one, not even a slingshot, right?
And I love the way they put it together. It's kind of like the poetry of it. Weapons of mass destruction. Sounds almost like a movie.
And you know something? You know who gave credibility to the whole thing? Colin Powell.
Oh, right. I remember that.
Yeah. He's the one that went before, he testified before Congress, and he showed some old footage of what may have been Iraqi warplanes spreading what appeared to be chemical weapons. And he was saying that Saddam Hussein had a stockpile of these chemical weapons.
That's the fear.
Now, of course,
because you got to sell it to the American public.
Now, he was the Secretary of State during this time.
Right.
Okay. Excuse me. As a general, and he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he would get daily intelligence reports. So he knew damn well there were no weapons in Iraq. no weapons of mass destruction, no weapons that had the capability of reaching the United States. These people in Iraq pose no threat to us, none whatsoever. So what we have is a situation where we went to another, or we started another preemptive war, which by no means serves the interests of the American people. Simple as that. It is the worst form of politics. And, politics, and we use the term tricks, because it's deceit is what it is. We deceive the American people. We use the media to lie. We create these courses in schools, right, taught by people who are funded by the CIA to carry a particular narrative. And it spreads like wildfire over the internet. And before you know it, it takes hold, right? Even though things may not make much sense, well, we make them make sense, right?
Well, like I tell you before, the way you want to get, or this country, or even politicians, the way they get people to do things, they use fear.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Donald Trump, the country is going down. Everything was gloom and doom.
Right.
So that was the fear.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you throw the fear, and then people became angry.
Mm-hmm.
So now you got some angry people, and then he comes along and says, "I can fix it all."
Well, Trump was right when he said that the country's been down for a long time.
Well, we still have the best economy in the world, though.
Actually, I don't know if we do.
I think we do.
I think that's what they're telling us, but I don't know if it's actually the fact. Let's think about it. 50 years ago, places like Motown were booming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Detroit's a wasteland part of it. Flint, Michigan, other automobile plants. In Flint, Michigan, children and families were drinking poison water in the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
Our manufacturing base has been sent off overseas, and that goes back to Reagan and Milton Friedman School of Economics, where they start talking about outsourcing. So outsourcing was good for corporations, but for the average rank and file worker, it meant the end of their job, the basic collapse of their community. Just look at Detroit. Look at Flint, Michigan, right? And that's repeated right here in Pennsylvania, down in Bethlehem, when they closed Bethlehem Steel.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah.
It wasn't
that
until
was a while ago, right?
the casinos came back that you saw some economic vitality in that region.
We're talking about Detroit and Motown. Do you think that the electric vehicles are going to boost back up? Because they said they're going to continue to work and build vehicles, and they're going to be taught how to work on the electric vehicles.
Well, here's the problem with that. Elon Musk and Trump are actually polar opposites, if you think about it. Trump was against electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
But now you have on your staff someone in charge of efficiency, one of the biggest producers of electric vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what's going to happen when it comes time to talk about building the economy, strengthening the economy, using alternative energy, source of energy,
Mm-hmm.
like the electric vehicle? What happens to Trump now, who took $1 billion from
from
the oil companies,
yeah.
right? And now he's going to say, wait a minute, we need to talk about preserving the environment. You have to keep in mind, in his first term, he rolled back these EPA regulations
Mm-hmm.
to make it easier to pollute, right? Get rid of those regulations. Now you got somebody that's saying, wait a minute, I produce electric vehicles. You know that's what I do. And I gave you $200 million.
Right.
So what are you going to do for me? It's going to be, I think it's going to be a bumpy ride for those two.
Right. I think it's going to be a bumpy ride for the next 4 years. But we're just about at the end of our segment, and we hope that we were informative for the viewers. Like I said, this is our first episode here on GenesisRadio.com with Mr. Ronald Yates and Kendall Stevenson, and we are politricking. So, I'd like to say good night, good evening, peace, amen.
And we'll see you next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, same time, same back channel, or
Have a good
same
night.
or same
Oh.
black, or the same black channel.
And you know what? To everybody who's listening, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
If
Thanksgiving.
you're a holiday celebrator, getting together with family, enjoy yourself. Don't eat too much, and we'll see you.
And if you don't really celebrate Thanksgiving for the traditional meaning of it, just get together with family. That's what it's all about, and that's what you're giving thanks and praises for, right? All right.